thank you so much for having us here. I'm so happy to be here in Oxford, Mississippi at your client's gorgeous home. You're like really the master of mixing things together. And I love seeing how you've brought things I could have never imagined working together, and they work perfectly. So I can't wait to hear all about the project. And I know it was a total renovation, so maybe we should just start there. Tell us about your client and what the house was like when she bought it and like sort of what her vision was.
This house is more of a passion project. The least amount of houses that I do are in Atlanta, where you and I both live. The majority of my career has been coast to coast. And what was really unique about this one is this is for a family member. When the house was bought, she had sent me the real estate listing, and then I immediately loved the images so much, I sent my local photographer, Aaron, over. I'm like, hey, I really want to see what these rooms look like inside with all the lights off. I want to see, is this a dark, moody old cottage? Because it's kind of like a 70s house mixed with like a kind of like an English cottage.
Yeah.
And I kept saying, I am so light-based that I'm like, I need to see if that house has a lot of natural light. That's where I kind of get excited about interior architecture and light. So when she sent me the pictures, I started to think this could be a phenomenal transformation that's more of a cosmetic renovation rather than a structural renovation. And then I came for the first time after I got those images and saw them. I said, I can do stuff with this house. And I just walked in and I just knew exactly what every room was supposed to look like. Yeah, okay. Immediately.
How? What is it that you're first imagining when you say you know what it should look like? Like, is that everything down to the wallpaper? Is that the styles you should use? Like, where's that vision come from?
Most of it's scale and proportion. So I walk into a room. I'm completely self-taught. I had no formal training. I went to school for television and film. I know how to direct and write and produce and art direct. But I walk into a room and I immediately see, okay, when I know the person who lives there, I know their personality. I see some of their key stuff they want to keep. I see some of their favorite pieces of art. I know the colors that they hate. I know the shapes they don't like, the silhouettes they gravitate towards too. And I'm like, okay, this has the perfect dimensions to have a 3-seater right over there with a skirted sofa. I can see over on this side of the room, we should probably have a slightly sloped arm with some type of button tufting that's more in the English world. I see that we have a house that was built in the 70s, so we should probably do something that brings back patterns from that Studio 54 age going into the early 1980s, high-waisted pants, a lot of beige, a lot of texture. And my mind starts to put together these mood boards that exist in my brain. And then what I try to do is I try to fine-tune a palette that would work for the era in which the house was built, but also then find things that would bring it into the current year. So when I knew that McGhee, who is my cousin again through marriage, my sister is married into her family. I met her and her young boy, Gus, years ago, right after the pandemic. They were my first visitors to come to my cabin in LJ. And I remember thinking, there's a lot of personality in this family. These are people that take risks. This is going to be a home where a little boy is going to grow up and he's going to be encouraged to play and be creative all day long in every space in the house. Nothing should be precious, but also this just shouldn't be a house that's a bunch of drywall boxes. So I knew we were going to start off by adding texture and pattern every single place we had the opportunity to.
So interesting that you say, okay, it's a 70s, there's a little bit of 70s, a little bit English, a little bit of McGhee, a little bit of her son. So it's like you're building a recipe and you're like just pulling spices from every different point of their life, I guess, and the house's life.
Oh yeah, I love the way you said that you actually just totally articulated the way that my brain works. Yeah, so if you were to put it together like a recipe and looking at a cookbook, the way that I look at it is we know that the end product is going to be this like 2,100 square foot house that is somewhat of a formal space plan. The rooms do somewhat open onto one another, but there are a lot of private spaces. There is one room in the house that used to be the kitchen, but we knew that should probably become a grown-up cocktail bar situation. And that can be the one part of the house that doesn't get a lot of natural light and can be moody. With the room that we're sitting in right now, when I first saw this house, this reminds me of like a late 1970s, early 1980s sunken living room that might have had a conversation pit in it. Yeah. And it was right off what was the dining room. And I kept thinking, and so did the builder, like, wait a second here, that's a really cool connection between graduate after dinner to hang out with friends. Yeah. So you make the dinner up there and then bring it down here, or make the dinner, eat in the adjacent dining room and then come down here. So one of the biggest changes that happened in here when I first walked into the house and I saw the plans for the remodel was what was the kitchen was going to be opened up a little bit bigger to be made into a dark and moody cocktail lounge. Then what was kind of like a pass-through to get into the dining room will become the dining room proper. What was the dining room will become a kitchen with an open arch that allows you to pass through or converse to the sunken living room. So we started with that. And then as far as peppering ingredients, like you were referring to before, I kept thinking, okay, we've got a 4-year-old who's going to be 5, then 12, then 16, then 20, come home from college. We're in a college town, Oxford. A lot of my family members through marriage they grew up here and they decided to stay here for college. So I wanted every single room to have its own identity with a color palette. They don't have to match at all. I do not like things to match, but I like them to kind of speak to one another. So we knew that we were going to take textures and colors from the late 70s, early 80s, bring in silhouettes and some accent colors that were light and somewhat feminine and very English in their history, and then figure out what will we do to bridge the gap between those two very disparate styles.
Yeah.
And that's where the whole thing gets handed over to me, and where McGhee, who's my client / cousin through marriage, I keep saying cousin through marriage because there's no blood there. So we are kind of related through marriage, but like once removed. So we met several times to just go over things that I thought would fit in the house. I learned Gus's favorite toys. I went to a few of his baseball games. He had some karate practices, and I was like, this is a weird directive. But I was like, this should just be a grown-up playroom, the whole house. Every single house should be a place where toys can be strung around. Nothing's going to be too precious. We can have a really beautiful area rug that has a bunch of colors in it. We can pluck femininity out of it. We can have neutrals in it. And then we just went from kind of using the directive that almost any room in the house could be a Gus and mom room.
Yeah. Okay. So many places I want to go. But I was thinking, you mentioned that the house has this 70s origin, right? Mm-hmm. And that you needed to bring that in. And we do hear that a lot from designers on the podcast about needing to bring in like the origin and identity of the house into the style. And I'm just kind of wondering why that is. Like, why do you have to bring a 70s vibe into the house?
It has to do with the house aging well. I think if you find a house you don't really pay attention to its original roots, and you put together something that's really pretty, if it's too pretty and too now, it becomes time-stamped. So I think if you sometimes bring back the original part, it will kind of age well.
You're right. Like it'll make it feel like it evolved and not like we came in and decorated. Okay, that makes sense.
That's it.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Okay, you were saying you wanted it to be like every room was a playground. I can totally see what pieces you picked to create that vibe, but then you also picked these very like fine, sophisticated pieces. Like I'm thinking this dining table that has this like brass castered foot, the bar with the the beautiful sort of round hardware, the burlwood table. So there was also these like really sophisticated elements too. The box pleat on the sofa. So how do you, what was it about those things that made you think like grown-up playground?
When McGhee and I were first going over the silhouettes of everything we wanted in the house, she was super apprehensive. She spent time in Los Angeles and in New York. She in her previous life, she was a pretty successful actress, and so I actually lived in both cities as well. And I think in her mind, anytime I get inspired by interiors that are social, I always think about life in the Hollywood Hills. I used to live there, and everything was just sexy and sunken and 70s oriented, and parties and hosting and cocktails. And I think her head was totally there. But I also kept thinking, we live in Oxford, Mississippi. The houses here are pretty traditional, and what I decided to do was, you know what? There's this hotel here that everybody stays at, the Graduate Hotel, and it is incredible. It is kind of like Southern prep, and it's got pinks and blues, but it's done in this new, sophisticated, playful, whimsical manner. So what I started to do was, okay, I'm going to introduce her to things that are a lot more soft and more feminine, rooted in classicism, and then we're going to pump it up with the art and some silhouettes that are kind of 70s or disco. And at first, when I showed her a lot of my options, she's like, well, I love the dining room table, which is burl wood. I love the bar, which I think is walnut. I love this table, which I think is oak and has the beautiful brass sabots. She was all in. And then when she saw the super feminine lines of the sofa, and she was like, that's more like in the granny coastal grandma world. And I stopped and I said, okay, as I'm a super flexible designer, but I'm like, here's the deal. We are young. I'm 49. She's 36 right now. It's nice to have a sofa that works right now, but will work when you're 46 and when you're 56. You just have it recovered. And I think within 24 hours, there was this huge turnaround mentally. She's like, wait, I don't want to change any of those selections. The sloped arm, I know it's not modern. The scalloped or the skirted sofa. She's like, you know what? It is not my norm, but I think I will like it forever. And so it started with, let's find some forever pieces that are not 2025, but in 40 years will still be in vogue or can look like they were around for 200 years. We started with that, and I pushed her a little bit more and more. She ended up really liking the traditional elements, and nothing is more on display in a traditional manner than the living room. The living room is probably the most traditional room in the house, but you add in that neon art and you introduce that palette. I mean, there's nothing, grandma's good. Grandmas are chic, especially here in Oxford, but there's nothing necessarily like, boomer about it. I think it's a very millennialized house.
Yeah, it is. Oh my gosh, the neon and the art wall that in that 2-story living room, it really takes those traditional pieces in a different direction. And that really, I think, is that art wall has so much personality. So talk to us about an art wall. I mean, there are 3-dimensional pieces in there. There are, portraits. There's Gus's art. There are all sorts of, there's like posters. So what are sort of like your parameters when putting together an art wall? And how are you kind of creating a cohesiveness that really makes sense, but it's kind of all over the place too? That's in a good way.
All over the place in a good way is the best way to describe the way that I approach art. It is by far the most important element in all of my interior design work, even if the space happens to be more minimalist or more grown up or more traditional. The way that I look at it is I always want one area of the house to be so statement oriented that you go French hang. And when I say French hang, that's when you do an art gallery installation that goes from the floor, basically the baseboards to the ceiling. The reason for a French hang is back, I don't know which century it was, but in Paris, what would happen is the artist would create really strong relationships with all the cafe owners. The cafe owners had the wall space and they had the traffic of people coming through with money in their pockets, sitting there looking at things. And so the artist would be like, wow, this is a space where people come in all day and see things and I'll have more exposure to my stuff. The cafe owners did not have thousands and thousands of dollars to spend on art. So it became this symbiotic relationship where the artists would come and hang whatever free wall space they could hang their art on. People would fall in love with it and buy it. The cafe owners consistently got a renew, like an updated redecorate in their house. So what I try to do is I try to find one.
I'm sorry, I've never heard that before.
Oh, really?
No.
Yeah,
but you should look at. So cool.
Yeah, there's a lot of.
I've never heard that.
One of the things I love about talking about interior design, and this is not me like boasting or bragging or anything, but because my background is not an interior design, I took it upon myself to study the hell out of it because
that's so cool.
There's all these little things that I find these stories so fascinating, and I would say I have them about 78% correct. Some of this is incorrect because that's just how life works these days. We look at the internet, we don't get books from libraries anymore. But yeah, I used to find that the way that these things were done back then is you have so much, especially in mansions and especially in Atlanta where we live, you'll see a lot of French hangs. And it's usually you have more art. In my case, I have more art than I have walls. So a lot of times once I have the edit down to my furniture, then I lay all the furniture out in the yard on a sunny day and I think, okay, which of these pieces of art are so phenomenal they have to exist on their own? And those go into a bedroom or into a dining room and they stand by themselves or they group together in usually odd numbers. I'm a huge fan of 7 pieces. I usually do like 7 pieces of art together. But I know
why
it's totally
7?
random.
I know odd, but why 7 specifically?
Because most of the time when you're collecting art, you'll find things that are 20 by 16, 36 by 48, 60 by 48. They come in standard sizes, but most people end up, from a palatable standpoint, can go to an art festival and buy something that is, 8.5 by 11 or whatever that standard size is. And you end up having like 30 pieces of art that are the same size.
Right,
but what makes for a good gallery wall is to have something really small, something medium, something large, something oversized, and something that is rectilinear. Not actually the opposite. Everything's going to be rectilinear. So then you want to bring in something biomorphic that has some type of roundness or shape or unevenness to it. So I usually find within 7, you get like 3 or 4 perfect rectangles or squares. You get something that's perfectly ovular. And then you might have a fine 3-dimensional object. And that combination creates this beautiful mix of silhouettes. Okay. So with this house, I found all these things that Gus had been making since he was in preschool. And I found all these things that were really important to McGhee over the years that perhaps they were so personal if they were in a room. You might be like, why is that random photograph here, nailed to a piece of wood? But next to a few other pieces created a really nice long story for history. So I found that one wall in the house was so gigantic, there was no way she would have one piece of art to fill and have it look balanced. So I decided to turn that into an entire history of her life and his. And there's so many colors in it, and it makes it so great in the future to pull any colors out of that wall to change your palette up. Because one of the easiest things to do, as you know, because you're a decorator as well, in many instances, is the easiest thing to do is change color and paint. Like, it costs no money mostly, or with accessories. So the reason for that gigantic French hang all over the place is every color in the spectrum is on there. So 3 years from now, if she decides she wants to do an all orange and yellow house, there's oranges and yellows to pull off that wall, and it'll work.
Well, people are always confused by the double-story living room because the scale is so grand, but really your furniture is kind of the same size, right? Like, it's human scale. So I feel like that art wall is a perfect example of how to really create drama in a place that requires drama. It's because it's so big, but it's hard to imagine like how to fill up that much space, you know? So just adding tons and tons and tons, and you could do that. You obviously did it over a couple of weeks. Someone at home could do it over a couple of years and just like keep, chipping away at little sections until they go all the way up.
Yeah, and one of the things I tell people to do all the time, and while you're here, you can even see this in progress if you want. We just have to walk through the hallway. One of McGhee's ideas was, a lot of us, like I working in entertainment, because I'm first and foremost a production designer. I design sets that are for the lens. But one of McGhee's ideas from a production standpoint was she wanted to turn the hallway that takes you from the great space back to the private bedrooms into the experience of what it's like to go to one of those iconic Italian restaurants in New York or in LA. When you go to a really popular restaurant that's been around for 8 decades and they have all these framed headshots of celebrities who've come in and said, Bob, thanks for the best pizza ever. She wanted an entire, this is your life experience of walking through that. And every single place you look, there's a headshot of one of her favorite people who's a part of her entire life with some type of message written, which I thought was genius. So you could see that.
It's so fun.
We're doing it right now, and it's by no means meant to be chic. It's turning a dead space pass-through area into something packed with personality. So the reason I brought that up is one of the other things I do that people can take away from is sometimes I find a frame that I love and I put the frame up empty and I put it exactly on the wall where it needs to go. So there might be one part of the house where there's a bunch of art and then there's 6 frames with nothing in them. But eventually I might find something, a photo or a kid's piece of art to go into it. And then that way over the years I can change it up or make it better. Because I do think that a blank wall is basically, I don't dislike them because I like minimalism as well, but a lot of times in the interior design world, I get a reputation for being too much. But the way that I look at it is we live in our houses, and I think the houses should be personal. I mean, my job is to elevate the level of taste. I don't want my job to ever be to come and tell you to get rid of all your stuff and buy stuff from me. I want to work with your stuff because in reality, when I'm not here on this planet anymore, I want the person to love their house, and I want the generation after them to love their stuff.
Okay, something just totally connected for me because I've really never done a French hang in my own space because, I don't know, I guess there's a part of me that feels like I really like this thing. I don't want to hang it at the floor because then I'll never see it. But I have 2 kids. Now I'm thinking, how sad is it for them? They never have anything hanging at their eye level. It's hanging at our eye level. Mm-hmm. So maybe I should think of it, instead of hanging it low to where I'll never see it, I'm hanging it low so that they can see it, because you never really think about your kids' point of view.
I have a 1-year-old, so we are totally on the same page with this. What I've done is I've learned that my best friend in the entire world is Velcro. Because
that's smart.
Yes.
That's so smart, actually. Wait.
I can't live without it. So Hollis, my better half, and I both, before Clover was born, we started to realize, okay, a lot of our precious art is higher up. Everything that's low that Clover can touch, because she's mobile now. She burns with the swim lesson worlds now, so she's really starting to kick and move and run. But anything that's kid level is either
it's fair game.
It's fair game. They're going to touch it, or it's like artwork I made as a child, or Hollis made as a child, or her cousins made that's Velcroed. But also, if it was pulled off, there's There's no glass. It's either it's framed with the glass taken out or it's acrylic. But I do think that's something for people to think at home. If you want to do a French hang, which I suggest you do, it's a great way to add personality to your house. Let anything below like 40 inches be not precious.
Yeah.
I highly recommend not doing anything precious within a child's reach because that's a financial nightmare.
Okay, wait. So do you nail it in and Velcro it or just Velcro?
Both.
Okay.
So I go ahead and nail it in knowing, this is how terrible I am. So I'm a very loosey-goosey, fly by the seat of his pants, very flexible interior designer. I can draw. My drawings they're one step up from stick figures. But I do have a team of people who do incredible drawings for me. But what I was going to say is I like to leave, I have this whole thing I call the 70-30 rule. I like 70% of every room to be 100% locked down. This sofa goes here, this is for there, this piece of art goes there, this light fixture needs to be sitting here exactly 69 inches above the floor. But then I don't know what art is going on which wall. On the other walls, like there's one wall where there's one piece I know where it's going to go. The whole reason I brought this up was I change things out a lot. So what I tend to do with art, this drives me crazy. So I know a lot of, especially architects, like they love everything very exact. And a lot of designers who are like remarkably mathematically inclined want everything to go in a certain spot. I'm a fan of every art having a wire on the back. Some people love to have an I ring or a D ring on each one. And then you have to have two.
It has to be so precise though.
I don't have, my brain doesn't do that. My brain is like, or my brain will be like, okay, I see that there's two D rings, but I'd rather just hang it by the bottom of the frame at the top, and then it starts to sag. And the more and more I speak to interior designers, they eyeball it too. So what I was going to say is what I find is I will usually put something with a very low weight nail if it's a low weight piece of art, but then I do the 3M things or straight up Velcro on the back. And then I just kind of put them, I sandwich them to the back of the piece of art. So the sticky side is on the art, then the other sticky side is going to go on the wall, and then I have somebody make sure I'm holding it level, and I just press it up. And then the good news is, like, it's pretty much up there. If they knock it off the wall, it's so low, nobody's going to get hurt. But I'm a huge fan of doubling up between. The other reason is when people pass through things in hallways, if it's just nail, they can move left or right if it's on a wire.
Yeah.
So I also think
the Velcro helps. Yeah,
it does. And also,
I'm totally stealing that.
Thank you. This is the stuff I think about at night, Caroline. So the fact that you even care about this, the fact that I'm not putting you to sleep right now makes me so happy. It's like a compliment.
I'm just so stunned that it has never occurred to me to hang art low for my kids, and that is a genius. So I need to get on that.
Do it, man.
It's going to really make such a difference. Yeah. Okay. Let's talk about the bedrooms. We were talking about the Italian restaurant headshot wall that goes back to the bedrooms. And they are these beautiful little, like, escapes. It's almost like it's a whole other world in there. In McGhee's primary bedroom, there's this beautiful wallpaper. Tell us about these spaces. They aren't very big bedrooms, but they have everything you need and they're beautifully done. So walk us through those.
What I really loved about this house, as a kid who grew up, I'm number 3 out of 4 kids. I'm from suburban Fort Lauderdale in Florida, and we lived in a modestly sized home, and it was enough. 2 boys sharing one room, 2 girls sharing another. And although we all dream of one day living in a big, beautiful mansion, I've had situations where I've done those houses before, and they're hard to fill, and there's several rooms that never get used. And I don't love that. So one of the things that I really love about the way this house was designed with more of a traditional footprint, and there are plenty of labors to help with soundproofing. Yeah. So if there's entertaining happening in the main spaces, whether it's where we are at the very back of the house in the sunken living room or the main grand space, there's several doors that will be shut before you get to where you're sleeping.
Yeah.
So you open this door on your way to the guest bathrooms and bedrooms, and you feel like you're walking through a really cool restaurant where over the past 5 decades, A-list celebrities have said, thank you so much, I had the best pasta of my life, but it's everybody from her life. Then the first thing that you walk into on the first floor is the guest bedroom, which was just supposed to be...
That's the guest bedroom?
That's the guest bedroom. Everybody thinks it's the primary. Thank you. We wanted to design it to look...
Our bedroom is upstairs.
Yes, and that is why I'm telling you. I'm going in this order so that you see, like... Most people who come to the house will see that guest bedroom and just assume it's the primary. It's so special, right?
It's so pretty.
And it looks super elevated and super elegant. And you're like, okay, this is the room where there was money dropped. That is actually not 100% one-of-a-kind hand-painted de Gournay. It actually is from Thibault, and it is a print. But that wallpaper looks like something that was custom designed for that room. And in fact, I think it's just 6 different panels that create that pattern repeat. So you walk into it, and you are elevated into a room that could have been created 200 years ago. And the color palette is beautiful and feminine. Every single thing is painted. The walls, the trim, the doors, the casing, everything is painted one of the turquoise tones from the wallpaper. The furniture is just remarkably simple. But I felt anybody who was going to come over and come to Oxford, which is this adorable little town, kind of an hour and a half from Memphis, I wanted that to be a forever guest room that people would feel like, wow, I'm getting to be in this primary hotel room, this very, but you don't. But then you close the door and you go down one more room over, and then Gus has this nicely sized room.
So cool.
It's a really fun space because when I had the wallpaper samples over here the first time the house was being remodeled, I had all these books of wallpaper and I knew which ones I wanted for Gus's room, and they were more in the botanical world. One of them actually I think was dinosaurs and another one was foxes. And for some reason, Gus, who's just about to turn 5, kept looking at this large Greek key print. Being 4, he didn't realize that it wasn't Greek key. He thought it was a G for Gus. And at that point, it wasn't even on my radar because I didn't think of doing a large Greek key, but he loved it because he kept saying, it's a G for Gus, a G for Gus. So at that point, how can I not do that? It's like taking candy away from a baby. I was like, no, he chose that. So I decided to run with it. And then I wanted to make that room a little bit more complex.
What great taste from the 4-year-old.
I know. Like he saw
Fabulous.
the G. He wasn't wrong. I mean, it's not necessarily a G, but it is the shape of a G-ish.
It is now.
It is now. It's the G wallpaper. But then I also realized, okay, I want to leave my mark on this and make this a little bit more of a complex design. Oh, wow, navy and white for a little boy's room. How interesting. But the reality is blue and white. I have a bunch of jobs that I do with HGTV that are very data driven. And it turns out that a blue and white bedroom is probably the most beloved space at any house because blue and white together never elicit a negative reaction. They're so classic and they're so versatile and they're so non-gender specific. They can go anywhere.
Yeah.
But so I decided, let's go ahead and play with complementary colors and introduce orange wherever we can. So the thing that I love about Gus's room is you take out all the toys that are in there. And that is a 15-year-old's room. It's also a 25-year-old's room. It's a 30-year-old's room. It's a 60-year-old's room. And by bringing in the hand-blocked print fabric on the custom drapery, there's this really complex play on scale because we've got the large-scale G wallpaper and then we have a small-scale block print geometric. So I decided, let's just go ahead and do a room that's kind of going to last forever. And if it turns out right now, he wants childish furniture, great. We can go with some type of big box place for a white dresser that can get dinged and knocked around, and then we can graduate to something nicer with beautiful wood, like from you guys by the time he's 10 or 12. The story of Gus's room is it is a bedroom that has a lot of personality, a lot of motion. He's a kid. He's super active.
Yeah.
But conversely, there's the upstairs bedroom.
So pretty.
Thank you. The upstairs bedroom was always supposed to be remarkably neutral, and it was supposed to be very Malibu influenced because McGhee used to live in LA by the same time that I did. I was there from 2011 to 2015. She was over there. She was there roughly around the same time. And there's something really relaxing about Malibu homes. There's usually not a lot of color. If there is color, it's something that's more sunset oriented or just neutrals on neutrals. And we wrapped the entire room in this beautiful raffia. It's very light. There's whites and then there's really, really light sand tones. It's the furniture she already had that she bought when she bought her first house years ago. That had sentimental value. So we brought that in and we kept everything very layered, and people come in this house and they walk right up to that bedroom and they're like, this is my dream bedroom. And I think it's because the pinks are so washed out. They're not they're not girly. They're just kind of like neutral blushes.
Yeah.
And that room is she's a single mom. She works in real estate and development. She has a little boy who's remarkably active. He's in karate. He's in baseball. He loves acting. He loves sports. He loves making things. So that was the one room that needed to be dialed down. And I think it's doing its job. Do you also find that to be a very relaxing space?
Oh, well, I walked in and I said, oh, it's pink, but I couldn't tell if it was just the light that it was like reading pink because of the light, or if it was actually a pink room. So I was like, oh, it's pink, but is that the lighting or is that the wallpaper? So I think it's very subtle and beautiful in the subtlety. Yeah.
Thank you. I would like people to walk into that and not know exactly, hey, is this a pink room? No, it's a white room, and you take away the pink elements and it's just a white room.
Right.
But I think that over the years, I'm not a huge fan of having to change up a primary suite that often because I'm really big on sleep. Like that's a huge deal for me. And the idea of like going through renovation, not having my space and my stuff that I need to fall asleep at 9:45 precisely every single night is not there. But the bedrooms I'm proud of. I think that they are, all three of them are totally unique. One feels remarkably elevated, like it's meant for a super VIP person. One is blues and patterns that'll grow through the ages, has a lot more energy, and one is just super tranquil.
Yeah. My other favorite part about that hallway with the bedrooms is the bathroom, because you did a pink tile, you've got that fabulous wallpaper, and that trim is all like burgundy. Where did the burgundy come from? I love how it's all played together, and what a special room that it's kind of like half powder room and half guest bathroom. So tell me about the whole origin of that space.
This is very strange, but we're both really big fans of like restaurants that we go to all the time because of certain little quirks that make us happy. What I love about the guest bathroom is when you tell your friends who are over, hey, the bathroom's down there, they go through the hallway that has all those autographs, headshots, which make me think of like the ones on the wall in a restaurant. And then you go into this gorgeous bathroom that's completely unexpected because you've got this kind of rose / terracotta tile on the floor. Then you've got this beautiful botanical, all these different reds and whites and blues and grays. And then the trim color in the ceiling and the door, I wanted to pull that really barn red out of the wallpaper, completely unlike all the other rooms in the house, but it's something you remember. If you're in McGhee's house, it's very likely your headshot's on that wall with a signature on it. And then you walk into this bathroom that's unlike the rest of the house. And it's a color scheme most people would be really intimidated to use in a main space that you spend a lot of time. But I love that little bathroom. I call it the little bathroom that could, because the before pictures, as you can see, like it did not look anything like this, but I think now it has a ton of personality.
Yeah. I really love a room where you can tell a guest, like, it's the red bathroom down the hall. Like, there's a name to it that you can direct people to. You know, it's like you have someone come over and you're like, oh, you're sleeping in the blue bedroom. So there's like a name to it that sort of like helps people get there. They're like, oh, I got there. There's a red trim. I know I'm in the right place.
We branded the rooms here. We're like, you are in the botanical bedroom. Or go ahead and use the all pink bathroom upstairs off the primary, or like the kitchen is the one with all the yellows and the greens, or the sunken dining room is the one that's all beige versus the dining room up there that's green and white.
You can't do that if they're all the same color.
I know. Yeah. Use the color to brand it.
Yeah, exactly. Each of the rooms in the whole house has a very unique personality and different from one another. But there's a flow. So how are you thinking through the flow? You said you don't want them to match, but how do you create a consistency to where you're not walking in and thinking like, whoa, can't believe this is here, you know?
Cohesiveness is probably the hardest part from an interior designer standpoint of making sure that a house works aesthetically and functionally. Mm-hmm. This is kind of a bizarre answer. So my formal training is in television and film production and editorial. A lot of times when you are doing a spread for a shelter magazine and you are styling, this is back before digital was number one. A lot of times art directors and stylists, what you would do is you would think about, okay, all these pictures of rooms that we're getting are going to be going together on 6 to 8 different pages. We have to have something visually that ties them all together to tell a concise story that's different from the one before it and the one that after it. So this one that's all about Brian's house, we're going to have something that every time you look at and you don't read the captions, you know, oh, this is part of this story. And you would do that with your styling, which means you would choose like 1 or 2 different colors that would appear in every single shot that once they're laid out with art direction, you know, oh, this is cohesive. So you would have, let's say at my house, you would have nothing but some lavenders and some yellows. Regardless of what the room was, there'd be something lavender or yellow. So as you're flipping through the pages, it's consistent. That is how I apply the same idea of cohesiveness to a house. So when you walk into McGhee's house, there are like 3 colors that make an appearance almost everywhere in the house, except for one space, which I'll get into in a little bit. There are greens, there are pinks, and there are blues in almost every single square inch of this house. And what happens is as you make your way, if you're going from a space that's kind of avocado or more in the olive world, then there might be a green that's totally different than that in another space. Like, for example, when you get into the living room, the fireplace is painted this remarkably simple shade of like sage green. Then you get over to the drapery in that room, and you're kind of more in the jade green world. You get into the kitchen, and the kitchen is like straight up 1976 kitchen appliance, avocado / olive. Okay. And then when you walk into the house, you think from a pink perspective, we've got pink neon, we've got blue neon, we've got pink pillows, we've got pink in our rug, we've got green in our rug. You make your way back into the guest bedroom, you've got blues and greens on the wallpaper. You go into Gus's room, you've got blue, blue, blue. You go up into McGhee's room, you've got layered blushes. You've got these things that repeat themselves and saying, hey, we've got this repetitive visual flow from room to room, just like when you're doing a magazine layout. And you choose one particular flower, one type of accessory that brings the rooms together. So the three colors that repeat are going to be greens, blues, and pinks. One of the best ways to explain like how I've layered all these different colors together in a way where you don't even notice, which is great. I never want it to be noticeable, is when you get into the dining room, which is what you stop at before you get to the actual kitchen, is we've got jade green on the window treatments. We've got a little bit more of a faded like aqua or seafoam green on the floor with the rug. Mm-hmm. And then we recovered the Ballard chairs in a velvet that is kind of in the pine green world. And there's also a local interior designer who is helping with all the sourcing here. And she told McGhee, she's like, I think you might have chosen the wrong color for that. And she's like, yeah, she mentioned that the green is totally different than the green in the kitchen. I'm like, hey, it's a primer, it's an intro. It lets you know you're going from like this understated green to like a 1975 green. So the green brings you into the kitchen. Okay, can we talk about the kitchen for a minute?
Yes. But hold on, wait. Let me pause you. I think to many people, in some ways myself, using lots of different shades of green that don't match at all, maybe aren't even in the same like ballpark, would be so scary. And you're telling me that it does not matter, as long as I'm repeating the same colors, it does not matter necessarily what shade of that color they are.
You are 87% there.
Okay.
So it all has to do with the balance and how, first of all, how intentional it is, but how unintentional it comes across to people who are not the designer. One of the hardest colors in the spectrum to work with, or the rainbow to work with, is lime green. Lime green does not know what the hell it is. Are you yellow? Are you green? Are you acid green? Are you lime green? Yeah, it's all the above. It is so overpowering, just like most yellows and reds, that it's really, really hard. My rule of thumb is if you are playing with greens that don't have a ton of bright yellow undertones, they will layer beautifully. The lime green can take it so intense that you might be living in the yellow world. So what I usually like to do is I try to find the darkest green, the most medium green, the most muted green, and then maybe one green that borders on brownish green or blue green to go together. And what I try to do is if I'm thinking peripherally about all these different places I'm looking with my eye, like this direction, if they are meticulously spaced out, and they're not all appearing together at once, they have other colors that come in and kind of intermediarily come in and kind of run interference and make it okay. So the best experience for this, or the best example of this, is walking into the dining room, which is pretty much all white with pops of green, to say, hey, get ready, there's some intense green coming in. When you go a little bit further and you get into the kitchen. The kitchen, I thought the kitchen was going to be the hardest sell. I remember a lot of my memories from my formative years were probably from like 4.5 to 7. That's when I was put into soccer. That's when I started to love homework. That's when I saw E.T. I have these remarkably fond memories, like from 5 to 7, which would have been like 81 to 83, where my mom was comfortable enough on the weekend, and my dad would be like, I'm going to bring Brian with me to work, because my dad was a real estate agent. And my dad would take me to the houses. My other two siblings were bored as hell. And I loved it. I loved seeing the shag carpet from these houses that were built in the 60s and 70s. And I have these fond memories of my formative years being with my dad on Saturdays and Sundays. We'd get cheeseburgers. We'd go look at houses. We would measure for them. My dad was also a real estate appraiser. And I remember walking into houses and just loving to see how all these people had different things. And I'm thinking about Gus. And Gus is at that age that I was, where I started to love music and I loved TV. I saw my first movie. The very first movie I ever saw in the theater with my dad and my sister was this Lily Tomlin movie called The Incredible Shrinking Woman. What a very specific movie to bring your 6-year-old to. But then it was E.T. and then the Goonies. And I have all these memories, and I kept thinking, hey, I'm doing this house for family. I would love for that family room to feel like the sunken living room that I grew up with, like from 81 to 84. So when you get to the kitchen, I'm like, what were colors that were everywhere for every early 80s kid? And the two colors you couldn't escape were the colors of your grandparents' kitchen appliances, which were harvest gold and olive green. Mm-hmm. And so I said to McGhee, how do you feel about if I do like a mustard and like avocado kitchen? And she didn't even bat an eyelash. So we had the custom cabinets made.
I love the choice of shade, and they're both food colors.
Isn't it crazy? You want some mustard or do you want some guacamole? Because they're both here on the walls in Backsplash. So she didn't bat an eyelash. And when I told her the psychology behind it, and I'm like, I have a little girl, she has a little boy, and they're adorable together. He wants to pick her up, and I'm still at that stage as a new dad. I'm like, please nobody touch my child unless you are like in my household. And he gets excited to play with her. And I kept thinking, this will be adorable. When we come to visit, we'll have this killer room and kitchen that bring me back to those formative years, the early 80s. And also, like, Clover gets to experience my childhood through me, like my childhood's like. So what happened was we got to this part of the house is a departure from the rest of the house because I wanted this to transport us back to the early 1980s and to just think of like Eddie Rabbitt on the radio, to think of like Elton John is still out there. You have like these women that are up and coming like Joan Jett and Crystal Gale. I kept thinking about, okay, these are very specific memories, but she loves listening to vinyl and she loves movies. And so the idea was, let's have a kitchen with a sunken living room next to it where we play up the greens and the yellows in the kitchen, but then let's go down to like late 70s, early 80s palette downstairs. Now, what's different about this room, we don't have the greens, we don't have the blues, we don't have the pinks. But what we do have is we have a super neutral, overly textural space that has all of those colors that would have been around in the late 70s, early 80s fashion, which would be tons of brown, tons of black brown. We have beige everywhere, and then we've got mustard. And if you look really closely at the fabric on the drapery, you will see a block print that is a cross between blush and peach, which is one of the most hated colors for any kid who grew up in Florida in the early 1980s because it was everywhere. But I went method. I wanted this to be the room that made me feel like, oh, I just woke up and it's 1982 again. So what's really special about this room is it's a disconnect from the rest of the house, but it kind of stands alone because it's somewhat detached. So you come down, I think you come down like 4 stairs, and we have this screen wall that's made of cedar because I grew up in a living room where Mom had the walls wrapped in cedar. They weren't stained or anything, getting very specific here. But what I love about it is you walk into this house and there are little elements of it that feel like English cottage. There are elements that feel like the 1970s, which is likely the time when this house was built. But every room is packed with memories. And so Gus's stuff is everywhere you look. I mean, there's even pieces from Ballard that I have in the main living room that are styled straight up with like his astronaut helmet. I think I have dinosaurs on some of the things. I think I actually have a plastic rocket ship, and I didn't want anything to be too precious. The furniture is high end. It's going to stand the test of time. The finishes are exquisite. The metals are exquisite. And I kept thinking, the furniture is so strong it can stand on its own. Let's go ahead and accessorize with stuff that's not precious. And then we get back here into this room. If you look, like every single square inch of this room, you can sprawl out on. You can sprawl out on the shag rug. We've got skylights above that blast us with light from like 1 to 4 every day. You can sit here and you can play games with your friends. You can have cocktails. You can have a meal just passed down from the kitchen. Yeah. And then the other thing that I love about this room that I cannot get over is the scale of that light fixture.
I know. It's just what this room needed. It's a perfect focal point.
The whole reason this room exists is I was playing on the website, and when I knew I wanted to do that borderline yellowy beige raffia wallpaper, I'm like, what's something that really screams like the Diana Ross disco era and fashion and hoop earrings and gold everywhere? And I was like, Ballard actually has a globe that looks like it's a cross between something that I shipped over from the East and also something that could have been up in a disco in the late 70s. And I brought that in. And to me, it's like a more elevated, grown-up version of a disco ball.
Yeah.
And man, I don't know why. This room makes me so happy. It makes me feel like I'm 6 years old again. But also, I am famously known for being anti-beige. And this is a beige-ass room.
Yeah. You know what? It is a room that you walk in and you think, I'm going to have a great time in here.
Thank you.
Like, it's comfortable. I love the telephone on the wall.
You noticed? Did you have that? You were born in 87, so you probably didn't have that.
We had some very similar. It wasn't yellow, but, a rotary phone.
I love that you know what it's called. That makes me feel less like a grandpa.
Okay, the other thing actually, about this light, when you're in the kitchen, it's right at eye level. So I love that you get to appreciate it from the room next door. This room I was so surprised by because that sunkenness, I imagine a lot of people would have sort of been afraid of because it does have a specific timestamp on it. And you really played into that timestamp, which I think is probably the opposite direction of what most people would do. But it works, and it makes it fun, right? Because it's like we're not trying to camouflage the fact that it's the sunken living room. Living room.
No, opposite. So this room, when I saw the scouting pictures, so the right here, like these are the photos. This is exactly what it looks like. So if you're looking right now, you can see it was super dark. That entire wall was packed with floor to ceiling cabinetry, but it wasn't cabinetry from the 70s. It was like really cheesy contractor grade cabinetry. And it was just dark and musty in here. And also the way that you came down the steps had no like architectural significance. So I just kept thinking, we need to embrace nostalgia. Let's clean this out. Let's get rid of anything that's built in here and let's start from scratch. And the idea was I just kept thinking about sunken living room, McGhee on the weekends, friends, girlfriends over. And we just went from there. And then everything kind of just fell into place. Like if you look at the size of the modular sofa, I mean, I think that thing is like 16 feet long, and that's why I had to use 2 of the Ballard coffee tables to proportionally balance it all. And also I was really, really methodical about how I spent the money in this room. I knew that since Gus is so little, and they're a dog family, but right now they lost their adorable they had a little dachshund named Dwayne who's no longer with us, but there will probably be a dog entering the picture soon. So I didn't want to go super high end with the rug in this room. I figured if we were going to have a beautiful luxe rug, we would do something in the main living room, which we have in there now.
Yeah.
So I figured in here, I'm going to spend my money on hardy things like the coffee tables, the dining room chairs, the light fixture, the dining table. The other stuff where feet come in contact a lot, let's let it be stuff that's not super precious. So even like the shag that I found on the floor was an online find that I found. It was for next to nothing. But I do feel like the standout features in here are definitely the dining room table, the chandelier, the dining room chairs, and then the combination of the 2 round coffee tables, so on purpose. Especially, you have 2 little girls, right?
Yes.
I have 1 little girl. My biggest enemy right now, corners. I can't do corners. And I kept thinking, okay, he's going to grow up in a room with all round tables where no little kids, especially me bringing Clover over here. It's a very kid-friendly room. And I also think that's why the neutrality actually plays favorably in here as well.
Yeah, well, plus it's such a boxy room that all the round shapes help to balance it out a little bit. And with the fabulous gallery wall, another gallery wall.
Oh, that's right. I have my back to it, don't I?
Yeah. And it is so fun, again, to do the French hang because it's so much space. You would have, and you've got this big black box of the TV. So I feel like the black and white art really helps to make the TV look like it's a part of a whole and not just like stuck on the wall, like a black TV can.
Oh yeah, the big black rectangle is a huge problem for all of us interior designers. And as somebody who's spent his entire career producing homes for television, like I need a TV in a main room. Yeah. So the idea was, hey, we can just pretend the TV's not here, or we can totally embrace it by doing an entire black and white gallery wall. So McGhee and I have started this tradition. We have a really good friend who's a photographer here. Her name is Allison Rogers. And what McGhee does is pretty much every year she goes back and has some type of family photos done with Gus as a mom and son duo. So over the years, a lot of these things can actually be changed out for updated family photos. Everything's in black and white, but it's basically a memory wall. And I thought that we're going to have a huge black rectangle in the middle of the wall. Let's just bring black and white photography everywhere. Now your eye goes to the photography instead of the TV.
Thank you so much for having us. What a treat. I mean, this house totally blew me away. It's such a little, surprise at the end of the driveway. And your imagination and vision and the way you bring things together is just unlike anybody else. So thanks for having us.
Thank you for being here. And let's just hope a lot of people look at this room and think that the early 80s is just as cool as I remember them.
I know. It really, that nostalgia makes such a difference and really makes you feel at home.
It's a forgotten era. And nostalgia is really what brings the memories into the decor part,
You're bringing it back. For more conversations like this one, be sure to subscribe to Ballard Design's podcast, How to Decorate, on your favorite podcast app. And don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel so you never miss a house tour like this one.